Welcome. I'm Doug Smith from Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. We are the Exceptional Children Department. Our co-directors are Ms. Dion Bates and Brenda Combs. So today's presentation is going to be looking at teacher-student relationships from a distance. And it's going to be based on the work of Douglas Fisher, Nancy Frey, and John Hattie. And the book that we got the information from was the Distance Learning Playbook. So one thing that we're going to look at today is we're going to look at some learning intentions as part of our presentation today. And those learning intentions look at positive relationships and how they're set by fair expectations by teachers. They involve students in determining the aspects of the classroom organization and also sometimes aspects of the curriculum that you use and the lessons that you teach. And it also helps hold students accountable in an equitable way. If you want students to ensure, we want to ensure students are reading, writing, and communicating and participating at high levels, we must expect that from our students. And we must show them that we have those high levels of high level expectations of them. And in order to get those high levels from those students, we need to build those relationships with our students. And so one thing that you got to remember is people learn from people that they like. If they don't like you, if you don't build that relationship, then it's going to be difficult for your students to build rapport with you and to like you. If they don't like you, it's going to be difficult for them to learn. One thing that you should remember throughout is you are the constant in a lot of these students and a lot of your kids' lives. You're the person that's there every day. You're the person that's got to hopefully the same demeanor, the same attitude, the same affect every day. And you're the constant and you're consistent in how you interact with your students. And as we all know during this time, that constant is one of the main things as far as building relationships. So just remember that you influence your students every day. So as we're looking at these, we're looking at some mind frames of visible learning. And these mind frames of visible learning come from the work of Hattie and Zierer. And they're looking at focusing on learning and language. So what we need to do is as teachers, we need to believe that we can change the trajectory of our students. We need to look at these mind frames and look at how they're used in developing positive, strong relationships with our students. So if we're looking at focusing on learning and the language of learning, we look at the way we focus on strategies that we use to teach our students and how and when we use these strategies. Striving for challenge is not merely doing your best, looks at the role of the teacher, and that role that the teacher plays ensuring that the learning is neither too easy nor too difficult for our kids. You know, what is that sweet spot? What is that right amount of challenge that we need for our students to have? You know, if we don't challenge our kids, they don't grow. So we need to challenge those kids. Don't make it too difficult. Don't make it too easy. Find that sweet spot where they are successful. And you have to realize that learning is hard work. And so you must consider making adjustments and refinements to your assessments, to your teaching styles, to your activities, to the lessons that you present. And you have to take into those struggles that our students have and the things that are going on in their lives right now. So recognize that learning is hard work and adjust your teaching strategies and styles accordingly. So when we're building relationships and establishing an environment where it's safe to make mistakes and learn from others involves positive relationships and developing high expectations for all students. You know, let the students understand that it's all right if you make a mistake in my classroom. That's what we learn from. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from our errors. And that's why we're here. We're here to help support each other. We're here to help build each other up. We're here to learn from each other, to teach each other and to learn from each other. Also engage in as much dialogue as you do monologue. A lot of times it's a one-way street or a one-way communication. We present the materials and we're constantly talking, and the students don't really reply to us, or we don't really take into consideration what they have to say. So make sure that when you have a conversation with your students, it's a dialogue, it's back and forth, it's not just one way. And that goes for the families as well, because a lot of times what do? when we have difficulties or when we have problems, we call the families and we don't listen to their side of the story. So make sure that you're trying to make an effort to use dialogue instead of just monologue with our students and their families and our colleagues as well. So when you're informing all about the language of learning, you're focusing on communicating the importance of the student and not just the teacher, but the student is the most important person in that classroom. We have to vary our strategies, make sure that we teach all students, not just the few that get it by the kinesthetic learners. We need to make sure that we use strategies and address folks and their learning styles, and that we're providing them with those opportunities to learn. And that goes, like I said, for all students. As far as being a change agent and believing that all students can improve, must take into account the perspective of the teacher, parent, and student, and how that has an impact on student learning. And then see assessments as informing impact and next steps. Look at those assessments, not only, how they're impacting the students immediately, but you're providing those students with feedback. And what kind of feedback are those assessments giving you? What do I need to improve in? What lessons do I need to reteach? What did I do well? What are some ways that we can improve the next time? So use those assessments and use different assessments throughout the year. Like I said, you may have to change what type of assessment or what type of presentation you provide or the learning style that you address. So make those adjustments based on the assessment that you receive and the feedback from the students and your kids. And of course, you want to share information with your colleagues. So next thing we want to look at are some characteristics of the teacher-student relationships. And as I said in the introduction a little bit, people learn better when they have a positive relationship with the person providing instruction. So as far as the characteristics of the teacher-student relationships, we need to look at teacher empathy. And that refers to how students seek connections with you. And how do you connect with those students and how those students see you and how do they see your understanding that you provide those students. Some ideals for improving that part of the relationship is to provide those students with positive affirmations at the beginning of your virtual sessions or even at the beginning of your in-person sessions as well. You may want to establish virtual office hours when the kids can come to you and meet with you and talk about things that could be academic or it could be some things that are bothering them as far as their social emotional health as well. So have those virtual office hours. Another ideal could be to have short check-in conferences with families and a student to see if there's anything that you need, that they need that you could help them with, and just provide those parents with that support, saying, we're here helping you. Thank you for all the hard work and the efforts that you're putting forth for your child. We're here also to help you in any way that we can. So just build those relationships by providing that empathy or that understanding of the situation that the students are in. Look at some unconditional positive regard refers to how your students know you care about them as people. What's the old saying? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So provide them with that warmth, provide them with, like I said, just some ways that to help build those relationships. Look at some of the interests that they have. And then you may want to look at by using some surveys and then include those interests in the class in discussions that you have. Also use your voice as feedback, provide them with verbal feedback, not just written feedback or things that you put on paper. That way they can hear in your voice how excited you are about their growth and how excited you are about the progress they're making. Provide them with that positive regard, that warmth, that genuineness. As far as genuineness, that's the teacher's self-awareness. So dress and groom yourself appropriately. Have high esteem for yourself. Have a positive demeanor. Have an optimistic demeanor. Make it clear in words and actions that your classroom, your session is a safe place for students, like we said earlier, to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, and make sure that they understand that it's a safe place that they can share with you and that you'll do what you can to help keep them safe and help provide for them. As far as non-directivity, student-initiated and student-regulated activities, it refers to how you let your students know you hold their abilities in high regard. Remember, have high expectations for all students, and those students will strive to meet those expectations. Identify the strengths, goals, and growth areas of all your students. Ask them thinking questions and problem-solving questions, and then involve them and encourage them to share out with you their ideals. And then encouragement of critical thinking. Like we said, it refers to how you have students use their thinking instead of memorizing information and simply repeating it. So some ideals is foster discussion among peers that open up their thinking, and then include opportunities for students to write about, illustrate, or discuss their thinking with their peers. Build choice and relevance into assignments and projects. So to help increase these characteristics of teacher-student relationships, look at teacher empathy, look at the positive regard for the students, your genuineness, that's more or less your professionalism, non-directivity, and encouragement of critical thinking. So as we're looking at judgment and will, and not just knowledge and ability, the knowledge and ability is the what. Well, a lot of times we just focus on the knowledge and ability or the what. Does the teacher know the content, and are we able to present that content to the students? And a lot of us, we know our content, and the students understand that we know the content, and we know the importance of that content. It is that knowledge and that ability. We're presenting them with the what. But what we need to think about as far as building relationships, you need to focus on also judgment and will. And the will is, how am I going to build a positive, supported relationship with the students I'm working with? And then the students want to know the why. And you also as well need to know the why. Why is this relationship important? Why is it important that I encourage little Dougie? Why is it important that they see us a positive relationship within my classroom and within this setting? So the will is, how are you going to provide those students with that ideal of positive relationships, and the why. What social value is that going to provide you in the long run? So judgment again is the why. Why do we build those relationships? The will is, how do we build those relationships? And knowledge and ability reflects upon the knowing the content, knowing your kids, knowing your materials, and how to provide the how to provide those materials in a way that the students learn. So we're going to move on to peer-to-peer relationships and how they're influenced by the teachers. As you know, teacher-student relationships and influence the perception of peers. Positive peer-to-peer relationships means that the students are not ridiculed. They don't feel they need to be silent. They can depend on the teacher and often peers to help them out. That relationship that you have with that student affects the peer relationship, and also affects how that student feels about peers and yourself. So another thing that you got to be aware of in a virtual setting is your actions and your nonverbal signals. They're noticeable more so than in a brick and mortar setting or in a classroom setting, because you're the one that's on the screen, you're the one that they're paying attention to. So all the kids are watching you. So when little Dougie starts talking about something that may be off task, what do? You may hit that mute button to quieten him down. You may, turn your head away from the camera. So try some way to redirect the conversation so that what he's saying is not relevant. So a lot of times those cues, nonverbal cues and signals and actions that we have, we don't really pay attention to or notice. Kids pick up on those because they're there. You are the center of attention. They're constantly watching you. So they're learning how to treat others by the way that you treat those students. So just be aware of those things and how those impact the relationship that students have with each other. Students who are disliked by the teacher are often known by all in the classroom. So those kids are often disliked by their peers as well. And that's a stigma that those kids don't outgrow or overcome very, very quickly. Just be aware that once the peers have that negative opinion about about you, then that's going to carry on from not just in immediate, but a long time to come. Also, notice that sometimes when you peers take a dislike to those students, Then another negative impact could be that the student takes a dislike to you. And we know what happens when students take a dislike to you. They cause problems through you for you every day in every setting. So if that's that's very difficult times for everyone when they take a dislike to you. So remember, your actions and nonverbal signals are noticeable. And then some negative relationships have the two outcomes of peers not liking the student, and then the student or students not liking you as a result of those. So a chilly classroom are those things where students we don't like often pay for it in terms of positive teacher relations or positive teacher attention. And so that positive teacher attention looks like these students that causes problems. They're often criticized more for their failures. They're praised less frequently, receive less feedback, of course, and they're all called on less often. They have less eye contact, have fewer friendly interactions with the teacher, and experience acceptance of their ideals less often. So one of the things that we need to think about is that a chilly classroom environment or climate in which some students do not feel they are valued and instead feel their presence is at best peripheral and at worst an unwelcome intrusion. So in our regular classroom, we know those kids that have struggles or difficult times. They sit on the outside edges of the classroom. They try to get away from the teacher's line of sight or teacher's line of view as much as possible. So they may be sitting in the front right-hand corner out of the teacher's direct line of vision. They may be sitting in the back of the classroom next to the door so that they can slide out of the class really quickly. The same applies in our virtual settings as well. Those may be the kids that, never turn their screen on or never show their video. They may be the kids that never make any answers or make any comments or suggestions in the classroom. They're the ones that are on the peripheral. If I just sit here to the side, maybe the teacher won't notice me today and I won't have to interact with them. And a lot of times, sometimes, not a lot of times, but sometimes we as teachers are glad little Dougie's sitting over there on the side. At least, he's not, don't have an audience to perform for. But you need to make an effort to contact and to build a relationship with those students. So the ones on the peripheral feel their presence is best suited there, or at the least, or at the worst, they're an unwelcome intrusion into our classroom and into our environment. Often the educators, we don't feel successful with students we see as low achieving, so we may avoid contact with them. We like to surround ourselves, like I said, with people that make us feel good about ourselves and about our abilities. So students who are not making gains make us feel like we're failures, and so we detach ourselves even more from those students. We tend to gravitate to those students that make us feel successful as educators and make us look better uh, in the big picture of things. Some of those students that we work with are difficult to reach and they're difficult to teach. And so, in order to improve our relationship with these students that it's difficult to reach or hard to teach, we need to look at increasing our positive attention efforts with students who we identified as being difficult to teach. If you've had a difficult time reaching a student, Miss Stephanie's caused problems in my classroom quite often. So I've decided I've took it upon myself. I'm going to start paying her more attention. I'm going to build a positive relationship. This has got to end. It's all, it's on my part, I got to make an effort to improve our relationship. Then I start piling on the praise, start piling on the recognition, start, just acknowledging her more and more right off the bat. And so what that's going to do is that's going to draw attention to that situation. So what you want to do, you want to start reaching out to those students that are hard to reach or hard to teach gradually. Don't throw all that attention on them at once because that's going to be like, hey, what's going on here? And then peers are going to notice it, and it's just going to make a situation a little awkward. So you start out gradually. Greet the students by name when they enter the virtual classroom, just like you do in a brick and mortar setting. Good morning, glad to see you. How are you doing? Awesome that you're here today. Man, I really missed you yesterday. Things like that. Just greet the students by name. You know how you feel when someone greets you by name. It makes you feel like there is a connection there and there's somewhat of respect there. So greet your students by name. Use their student's name during sessions, not as a correction. If I'm being silly and goofing off, someone calls my name, it's used more as a correction. Use their names as in, like we said, in dialogue. You want to have a conversation with those kids. So make sure you're using their names, not just as correction, but as a way to gain their attention and provide them with some acknowledgement. Ask the students critical thinking questions that's related to the content. Don't just ask them, like we said, those things that they can answer from memory. Ask those questions that make them think a little bit, and then ask them those questions that they may need assistance from peers to help them with their thinking. Ask them personal questions. And when you ask them personal questions, use that information that you've gained to help build those relationships, but also to help other peers in their setting to in the environment to build that relationship as well. Ask those personal questions and then use that information to help you build those relationships. Easy one, pay students a compliment. When you're praising them, don't just use good work, good job. Be specific on what you're praising them for. Just notice things about the kids that you work with and pay those kids compliments and then encourage those students. And then, of course, praise and acknowledge students for their learning performance, for their struggles, for their difficulties. Validate their feelings, validate their emotions, and just work with their students and praise them and acknowledge everything that they do positively. So when we're looking at how we can improve our contact with our students, we may want to look at increasing our touch points. And those touch points include interactions we have with students, even when they're not in our classroom. What are some ways that we're contacting our students throughout the week or throughout the day? What are some of the things that we are using to help our students understand and realize that we're working for them, we're working with them, we're there to help them and to build that relationship. So, what are some touch points or contacts? And also, what are some ways that we're using to contact the families throughout the week as well? So, some of the ideas that we use is one is to have a system for calling on students and noticing whose students aren't participating or haven't participated. So, when you call on students to respond to questions, have a random way of calling on your students. And some suggestions are to use like craft sticks or popsicle sticks, write the kids' names on them, put them in a cup, pull one out. Then, whoever you call out, ask them a question, put that to the side, and then keep doing that until you have your discussion completed. Other things are have name cards on a ring. Keep a tally. Just have your class roster and keep a tally mark on or a tick mark on the students that you've called upon, and then notice the ones that you haven't called upon and pay special attention to those and provide them with those opportunities to respond. Make sure that every live session includes whole group and small group discussions. Find ways to use your students' names, ask non-directive and critical thinking questions, demonstrate unconditional regard for those students. Some ideas is, of course, cut your lecture time, have conversations, dialogue, interesting topics that you can use instead of just standing up there and lecturing the whole time. And then you could also maybe ask older students to develop questions from your lecture and have those students to maybe present those to the classroom in a small group setting. Use breakout rooms like we used, or if your learning platform allows it, use them, group them in different classrooms, but make sure it's equitable in a random way. You wouldn't want all of our kids with IEPs in one classroom, or you wouldn't want, make sure that it's some way that the kids are randomly placed instead of signaling or calling them out and putting a spotlight on those kids. So if you assign discussion boards, which oftentimes we do as far as meetings are involved, and I'm sure I'd imagine in the classroom you assign discussion boards as well. So you need to actively participate in those as well. Don't just assign something and just for the sake of making an assignment. Make sure that you're active presence on your discussion boards, and then keep track of who you respond to as far as discussion board activities are involved as well. Again, you could use your notebook, your class roster, other ways like that to make sure that you keep track of who you've interacted with and who you need to make an interaction with. And then a pop-up pedagogy is ways to increase touch points across the week. How are ways that you're going to use to let your students know that you're thinking about them during the week, and thinking about them when they're out of your classroom, not just when they're in your classroom, but when they're outside of your classroom. And some of those things are send messages to students and their families several times a week. Send just a greeting with a motivational quote or an intriguing question they'll be thinking about when they come to your session, and be able to share out things that they have or ideas. You may also ask students to put photos of their assignments as they're completing them, provide you with that visual of the assignments while they're working on them and completing those assignments. Put those up on your whatever your platform is that you're using. Now, just be aware of the confidentiality with that stuff. Make sure that you follow confidentiality and that you don't, label or point out which kids have IEPs and which kids don't, things like that. So just be smart about that. Also, you can have younger students submit photos of themselves with completed assignments. I think there's an example of a gentleman had his kids, they were talking about buildings and forts and things like this. So he had the students to uh, create a pillow fort, and so the pillow fort ideal after the kids got finished, of course he couldn't go to their homes and see all their pillow forts. So I asked them to take pictures of them in their pillow forts, and then he brought those up on screen when they got to the class in session and shared that information out, and asked them to talk about, share what that looks like, and how you came up with the idea, and what was the design, and who helped you, and things like that. Just uh, build interest in with peers in the whole classroom, and then also help assist with building that relationship with the students that you have in your sessions. You may want to personalize directions for assignments as well. Make a short video rather than only providing them with written directions. And then, use your feedback, short video feedback to individual students as well. That way it's kind of more personal, and it just lets them know that they are they're on your mind, and you're thinking about them, and you're thinking about ways that you can interact with those students. So, in conclusion, one of the most important influences on student achievement is how the teacher thinks about learning and your role in that process. The 10 mind frames of learning, when adopted by educators, maximize student success. People learn better when they have a positive relationship with the person providing instruction. Educator actions and nonverbal signals are easily noticed by students, so be aware of those. Your actions and interactions often influence the perceptions of peers, both positive and negatively, and must foster warm, welcome, caring environments that make students feel safe and make them feel capable of being successful. You want to make an effort to validate, recognize, and acknowledge students often during class sessions. And then, like I said, also when they're not in class, some way that you can connect with those students. And finally, increase your connections and communication with students by creating touch points throughout the week, even when the students aren't scheduled to be with you. And those touch points also are aimed at families as well. Maybe you can have some way that you interact or connect with the families as well as the students. So just make sure that, family situation is important. Get them on your side, of course. All right. So thanks everyone for, like I said, for your attention and participation today. I really appreciate it. Wishful that we provided you with some information that you can use to help you think about how the relationship that you have with your students, and how you could improve that relationship in a distant learning situation and in a brick and mortar situation as well. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. In closing, I'd just like to say thank you. Again, thank you all so much, everyone. I appreciate it. My name is Doug Smith, and if you need any information or any help or any way that I can assist you, you can contact me at doug.smith@hazard.kyschools.us, or you can contact me at dougsmith@theholler.org. And remember, be safe, be kind, be exceptional. Thank you.